I want to start this video off by saying that you are not lazy. There's nothing inherently wrong with you. And I want to talk a bit more about why I think this is. So this post did a very good job about saying this. It says, "How do I stop being so lazy? Over the past year, I feel like as if my motivation had deteriorated, and I no longer feel like doing the things I used to. It's hard for me to shower and take care of myself most of the time. I have a lot of projects I want to complete, but no motivation to do it. I find that I spend most of my days on YouTube or scrolling on my phone. Dishes pile up, no food gets cooked, and I start eating out more and start gaining weight. To me, this all sounds like depression, but it doesn't really feel like when I've been through a depressive episode before. I'm also on depression and anxiety medication, and I've been so on the last few years for now." And he also continues to go on to basically say that he just can't really get himself to do the things that he used to be able to do. And he just says, "What's wrong with me?" So, what I'm really going to say to this is I don't think that there is anything inherently wrong with people. Right? I don't think people are inherently lazy. I don't think people have something inherently wrong with them. And it's interesting that actually, he said that it sounds like depression. Now, one other thing that I will say is I don't like the word depression because it's almost as if you have this negative label that's put on you, and now you have this just, almost what is this just illness. And I don't know, to me, it just sounds like you just feel weaker by just saying that you have all of these problems. Now, what I will say is I know from a personal experience that, I have definitely sort of felt these things where I just weren't really that motivated to do anything. And I think a lot of it, what I now know, is from dopamine, right? And this being a few things, right? And this being in terms of what you're consuming, what you're doing, and what the reward to risk ratio, reward to pain ratio is looking like. So for this guy, watching YouTube or scrolling on his phone, right? If he's spending most of his day on there, I'm assuming that's probably at least 5 hours, if not 6 hours a day, just consuming content, just scrolling. Now, obviously, from a dopamine perspective, especially if you're doing that pretty early in the day, that's going to tank all your potential drive and interest to do anything at all. And I know for me, when I was in those states, where don't get me wrong, I've had multiple times, over the last few years, where I would play video games from 6 in the morning to about 2 in the afternoon, literally. And don't ask me how I managed to do that, but it was just purely a dopamine thing. And surprisingly enough, afterwards, I didn't want to do anything. Right. So, looking at that, it's like, well, it makes sense because it's obviously my dopamine's just been completely drained. Now, what I will say is actually looking at this, right? I think what's most important to understand is a few things, right? And I think the first thing is that whenever cracks start to form within habits or within your life, that can often ripple across. And I've seen this sometimes where maybe I might play loads of video games and all of a sudden, I'm more tempted to eat some, worse food, right? Now, I think in terms of actually what I've been doing to better do this, and honestly speaking, over the last couple of weeks, I haven't been doing so well dopamine wise, right? I've been spending a bit too much more time, consuming content, sort of like this guy, not to the extremes though. So here's pretty much what I'm going to be doing. The first thing is basically setting stricter blockers. In terms of just, how much time I can spend on things and when I can use them. The second thing is actually asking myself a few questions in the sense of, well, how much time do I actually want to be spending on this stuff every day or every week? Because that gives me a very clear idea of, well, what am I actually asking from myself? Right, so at the moment I have the goals of being able to spend 6 hours every single day doing game development, which should effectively add up to about 42 hours a week. But last week I only did 20 hours. And I know that that was primarily because my energy was elsewhere, right? It was consuming content. It was, I don't know, playing video games, whatever it was. So when I look at stuff like this, for me, when I asked myself and felt like I'd just been inherently lazy, I know that's not the case. Now, I know that a lot of it is just down to how I'm feeling and down to dopamine, but also just the things you're consuming as well, right? If you're eating rubbish stuff, right, rubbish food with loads of additives and stuff, and you're, whatever, then obviously you're going to feel worse. So, what I want you to ask yourself today is, first of all, how much time do you want to be spending? For example, scrolling content, consuming it, or whatever other bad habit you have. That's the first thing, because if you get that clear, then you can set those boundaries. The second thing is actually figuring out, okay, well, how can you make it more difficult for you to do whatever said habit? Now, for me, if this is something to do with your phone, then ideally speaking, try and leave it as far away from you as possible. And if, for example, if you do feel that you're getting those temptations to, go and do those things, then maybe go for a walk, just do some exercise, and slowly try and break away that habit. We're not trying to go cold turkey on these things, because especially for someone like this guy, it just wouldn't work, in my opinion. But yeah, and I think just at the end of the day, understand that there is nothing inherently wrong with you, right? There's nothing inherently wrong with you. You're not inherently lazy. You're not, just, having this massive issue. And I don't see this as depression. And honestly, I don't like the idea of depression. I just think it puts a bad label on you and almost says that there's something wrong with you, even though I feel like a lot of the time there's a lot of things we can change. But hopefully you found this video useful. I'd like to know your experience below. But that said, take care.